She pounded on my front door like she owned the place, waving a clipboard and shouting, "You're trespassing on HOA property! You need to leave right now!" Before I could even answer, two men in dark uniforms came strutting up the porch like some kind of SWAT team. No badges, no marked cars, just cheap patches on their shoulders, and hands resting on their belts like they were ready to drag me off. "Step outside, sir, or we'll arrest you," one of them barked. My gut twisted, but not from fear, from anger. This was my home, bought and paid for, with land that had been in my family for decades. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Arrest me? On what charges?" Karen smirked like she'd already won. "Failure to comply with HOA authority." She actually said it like it was real law. The fake cops moved closer, trying to intimidate me, but I didn't budge. That's when the door behind me clicked open. My wife stepped out, calm as ever, her hands sliding into her jacket pocket. The men froze when she pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open. The gold badge caught the light. "U.S. Marshal," she said, her voice sharp, "you boys want to repeat what you just told my husband?" The two uniforms exchanged a quick look, their confidence draining in seconds. One actually muttered, "We should go," before backing off the porch. Karen's face went pale, but she tried to hold her ground. And I just smiled, because now it was her turn to answer.
Karen's smirk cracked the moment the men she brought with her started retreating, their boots thudding awkwardly against the porch steps. "Wait, don't you dare walk away," she hissed, chasing after them. But they wanted nothing to do with my wife's badge. They practically jogged back to their car, jumped in, and peeled off down the street without a word. Karen spun back around, her face red and tight with fury. "This doesn't change anything," she spat. "You're in violation of HOA rules. I'll have the county sheriff handle this myself." My wife tilted her head, her eyes locked on Karen like she was reading every lie. "Funny thing," she said slowly, "I am in contact with the sheriff. Want me to call him right now and let him know you sent imposters to our door?" Karen faltered. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback ready. She grabbed the fake notice she had taped to our door earlier, crumpled it, and stuffed it in her bag like nobody saw. I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. "You don't own me, and you don't own this land. Next time you send your little rent-a-cops, make sure they're real. Otherwise, you'll be the one in handcuffs." For a second, I thought she might back down. Instead, she clenched her jaw and stormed off, muttering, "You'll regret this. You'll see." But the way her hands trembled told me she wasn't finished, and whatever she planned next was going to be bigger.
That night, the neighborhood was quiet, but too quiet. Even the usual dogs that barked at every car stayed silent. My wife sat at the kitchen table, her badge resting beside her coffee mug, while I checked the locks twice over. Something in Karen's parting words kept echoing in my head. "You'll regret this." Around midnight, headlights swept across the front of our house. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb, engines still running. Two men in suits stepped out this time. No uniforms, no patches, just dark suits with clipboards in hand. They walked right up to the porch like they were federal agents. One of them knocked, sharp and heavy. "Open the door. We're here on official business." My wife raised an eyebrow, whispering, "She upgraded. Fake cops didn't work, so now she's trying fake feds." I opened the door just enough to see their badges. Plastic, flimsy, the kind you'd find in a toy store. "Official business, huh?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "What agency are you pretending to be from tonight?" The man didn't flinch. "Department of Housing Enforcement." That almost made me laugh. My wife stood up slowly, her badge flashing in the kitchen light. "There is no such department," she said coldly, stepping into view. "But there is a federal charge for impersonating one." The men froze. I swear I saw sweat forming at the corner of one guy's forehead. For a moment, neither of them spoke, until their radios crackled and a woman's voice hissed, "Get out of there." It was Karen. She was sitting somewhere close, pulling the strings. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the street. Sure enough, a silver SUV sat parked a few houses down, engine running. Driver's seat reclined just enough to hide the face inside. But I knew that voice. It was Karen, watching her little stunt from the shadows. The two fake agents shuffled nervously, glancing back toward the SUV like kids waiting for permission to run. My wife didn't give them the chance. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number straight from memory, and spoke with the kind of authority that froze everyone in place. "Sheriff? Yeah, it's Marshal Turner. I've got 2 impersonators at my doorstep and a third party giving them orders from a vehicle nearby. You might want to bring a unit before I cuff them myself." The men's eyes widened. One whispered, "Marshal?" Like the word alone drained the blood from his face. They didn't wait for backup. They bolted down the steps and sprinted toward the silver SUV. Karen's door flew open, and she started waving them inside like a frantic coach calling a timeout. But her timing was bad. Just as they piled in, red and blue lights cut through the dark street, sirens wailing. The sheriff's cruisers boxed her SUV in before it could even move. I crossed my arms, standing on the porch with a slow smile. "Guess your HOA rules don't mean much against federal law, Karen." Her head whipped toward me, her face pale and twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" she shouted through the window as deputies pulled her out. "This isn't over." But for the first time, she didn't sound so sure.
The deputies yanked the 2 men out first, pinning them against the SUV, while one officer started reading charges of impersonating federal agents. Karen, however, didn't go quietly. She twisted, shouting at the top of her lungs, "This is a mistake. I'm the president of this community. I make the rules." Neighbors started peeking out of windows, some even stepping onto their porches in their robes. Phones lit up as people began recording. My wife didn't even flinch. She just folded her arms and let Karen dig her own grave. One deputy asked Karen calmly, "Ma'am, do you have any legal authority to send these men?" Karen puffed up, her voice cracking with rage. "They represent the HOA. That's higher than your sheriff's office." The crowd actually laughed. Someone across the street shouted, "Lady, it's not even a real HOA." That made Karen freeze, her eyes darting as more people began murmuring. I stepped closer, my voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. She forged HOA documents, tried to evict me from my own land, and tonight she sent fake law enforcement to my door. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's shoulders dropped as the deputy snapped cuffs on her wrists. But just before they pushed her into the cruiser, she locked eyes with me and hissed, "You don't know who you're messing with. I have friends in higher places." And for the first time, I realized she might not be bluffing. The sheriff himself arrived not long after, his white SUV rolling up with the authority only he carried. The crowd stepped back as he got out, his hat tilted low, his face unreadable. He glanced at Karen in cuffs, then at me, then at my wife, who still had her badge clipped on her belt. "Marshal Turner," he said respectfully, giving my wife a nod. "Mind explaining what I just drove into?" She kept it simple. Impersonators sent by this woman. Harassment, trespassing, and attempted intimidation. Karen snapped her head up, her voice sharp and desperate. "Sheriff, don't listen to her. She's lying. This property falls under my HOA." The sheriff cut her off with a raised hand. "Karen, this land isn't even in your HOA jurisdiction. You know that. And sending imposters in fake uniforms, that's a federal crime." The crowd buzzed, phones recording every word. Karen's face drained of color, but she still tried to twist it. "They promised me it was legal. I was just protecting the neighborhood." The sheriff stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "No, you were abusing it. And now you're going downtown." As deputies moved her toward the cruiser, Karen suddenly shouted, "You'll regret crossing me. My brother's on the county board. You'll all pay for this." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but his eyes flicked to my wife. "Something tells me this isn't just about an HOA anymore." And that's when I realized Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor with a power trip. She had connections, and this fight was about to get much bigger than our front porch.
Karen was shoved into the back of the cruiser, but her words hung heavy in the night. Neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, others filming every second like it was the season finale of a drama. My wife stayed calm, though I could see the way her jaw tightened. She knew when someone was bluffing, and Karen didn't sound like she was. Minutes later, another black car rolled up. Sleek, tinted windows, county plates. A man in a suit stepped out, his tie loose like he'd been dragged out of bed. He walked straight past the deputies and straight to Karen. "That's her brother," one of the neighbors whispered. The man leaned down by the cruiser door, muttering something we couldn't hear. Karen's face lit up like she'd already been pardoned. She looked right at us and smirked, as if to say, "Told you so." The sheriff stiffened, stepping forward. "Evening, councilman. This is an active arrest. Best if you don't interfere." But the councilman raised his hand casually. "Sheriff, let's not make a scene. My sister may have made mistakes, but surely we can resolve this without headlines. After all, this neighborhood votes." The crowd grew restless. Phones were raised higher, every angle captured. My wife moved up beside the sheriff, her badge glinting under the streetlight. Interfering with a federal investigation is a crime, and trust me, you don't want that headline. For the first time, the councilman hesitated. He looked from the cameras to the badge to his sister squirming in cuffs. The weight of public eyes was against him. But Karen leaned forward, pressing her face to the window, her voice shrill. "Don't let them win! Do something!" And right there, the tension snapped. Everyone waited to see whether the councilman would try to pull strings or let his sister fall.
The councilman's hand hovered in the air like he was weighing his power against the dozens of phones pointed his way. For a second, it looked like he might push back, but then my wife's voice cut the night like a blade. "Think carefully," she said, stepping closer. "Your sister already crossed the line with impersonators. If you interfere now, you'll cross into obstruction of justice. And I promise Washington will hear about it before sunrise." The sheriff folded his arms, silent but firm, letting the weight of her words settle. The crowd leaned in, hungry for the outcome. Finally, the councilman lowered his hand, his shoulders sagging. "Fine," he muttered. "Do what you have to do." Karen exploded, thrashing in the back seat. "You coward! You're supposed to protect me! They don't belong here! I do!" The deputies slammed the cruiser door shut, cutting her voice off. The red and blue lights flickered across the street as the car pulled away, taking her screams with it. The neighbors clapped, some even cheered. I turned to my wife, still stunned by how fast it all escalated. "You think that's the end of her?" I asked quietly. She slipped her badge back into her jacket, her expression steady. "People like her, they always come back swinging, but the law swings harder." The sheriff tipped his hat toward us before heading off. The street slowly emptied, neighbors retreating inside, murmuring about the craziest night this town had seen. And as the silence returned, I stood there on my porch, a strange mix of relief and fire burning in my chest. They had tried to strip me of my land, my dignity, even my freedom. But tonight proved one thing. I didn't fight for this country just to be told I couldn't stand on my own porch.